Hello everyone, hello subscribers, hello followers. Today is the 21st of October 2023. I have been learning, I have been studying, I have been reading about the history and the struggle of what is now going on in this second war. And first, before books, before I normally start reading books, a question always arises in my mind by watching some videos on YouTube, and that actually talk about a subject, and as they are talking, a question or several questions come to my mind. And then I decide to go back to the histories and the books and reading about it. They don't necessarily provide the answers. A YouTube video, however long, is never going to give you the full context of the thing. But it certainly, at least to me, it raises questions on my mind. And if I find it interesting, then I said I have to look more into this. I have to go and see what I can read and learn. And so this has happened with this struggle now, with this conflict. And first of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about each video, and I will put them down and below. Yes, in the below in my channel. And I will give you the link to those. But I will just tell you very, very briefly what they are saying and why that inspired me to go and look deeper into this. One video, which I didn't know at the time about the rabbi in question, but I learned afterwards that he's a little bit controversial, is a rabbi, an American rabbi, Rabbi Weiss, W-E-I-S-S, in New York. And he is an Orthodox, what we normally say, Orthodox Jew. He refers to him in an. I don't think he has anything against the word Orthodox, but he has defined himself as an observant Jew. That is what he says. And he explained to me, as I'm watching him, I realized that, first of all, I don't know anything about anything, about the subject, obviously, which I was aware of. But he sort of opened my mind, even if he's controversial. He opened my mind about what the division is in the Jewish community. Because let me tell you at first that I didn't know the difference between a Jewish person and a Zionist person. I really didn't know. I was confused. First of all, I thought it was kind of the same thing. And then I realized that the way people speak sometimes, that there is a difference. And then I thought, well, I don't know, perhaps the difference is between those Jewish people who want to live in Israel, and they are for that very much, and those Jewish people as well who don't really want to go and live in Israel, and they are happy living somewhere else. I thought that was the difference. I knew that there had to be more than that, but I thought that was more or less the distinction. And now I find that actually what he says is that Judaism, the faith, and Zionism are two completely different things. Completely different, he says. Actually, it's not kind of the same thing with different nuances, but difference. And there is a difference. He says, because one is about the faith, is about Judaism, So it's about religion. A religion, he says, that goes back 3,000 years. And the other one, Zionism, he says, contends that it is Judaism, but is something different, he says. The difference to him is that was started only about 150 years ago. And that was, he said, started by secular Jews, people who no longer believe or no longer practice the faith. And it was more a sort of a political and nationalist and political ideology. He says that it is political in nature, and he says openly it has nothing or very little to do with the Jewish faith. Let me bring myself closer to the microphone because sometimes we have problems. But he adds, and that's probably why he is so controversial also, because he says they are mixed on purpose. It is mixed together with Judaism, and it has been since the 1920s, to appear legitimate. So he states that what the Zionists do, he asked them, he says that they do it in the name of the Jews, and he rebels against that, and he says that no, that is not what Judaism is about. I quote from him, this is a quote: "Zionism is a political movement. It is about land and materialistic movement. It was started by Jews who were non-religious, and they're using the name Israel and using the Star of David. And that is very, it imparts a lot of suffering to many Jews. It hurts us because it is being done in our name." And he actually, well, he goes on. I have to be very careful, in this, in the videos, what one says and so on. But anyway, so he says that they're not the same thing. One is religious, the other one is political and ideological. It's a sort of a nationalist sort of ideology. And therefore, he concludes that what the state might or might not do, they say is in the name of the Jews, but he contends that shouldn't be the case. They're two completely different things. Now, in this, before I go to the next professor, it's a professor from the University of Exeter in England, Professor Ilam Pappe, who's also Jewish. He just gave a conference at Berkeley in California. And I don't know whether you remember, I did a video once, I don't know, perhaps a month ago, on the differences between nationalism, patriotism, fascism, Nazism, how a positive sense of nationalism, being loving your country and wanting to keep your culture and so on, also has a negative aspect, which is when it is taken to an extreme, and you end up where we ended up in the 1930s. And I gave you as an example just to remind you of these different kinds of nationalism as an ideology, not as a religion or a faith, obviously. I gave you as an example, first of all, in the 18th century, the idea of nationalism that Jean-Jacques Rousseau used, this is in the 18th century, that was a nationalism about the nation state, the individual versus the state, and so on. Then Gottfried von Herder in the 18th, 19th century. And he explained nationalism in terms not of geography, but of nations, state, but in terms of culture. So he was looking at the German peoples, perhaps at that time scattered throughout many different states in Europe and so on. So he placed nationalism in sense of culture, the same God, the same customs, the same traditions, the same language, and so on. That is a nation, he said. And then we have later on in the 19th century another example of Giuseppe Mazzini. Giuseppe Mazzini was Italian, and his thing was about bringing Italy together as a nation state. And so he emphasized nationhood and patriotism and action, and then we have already getting to an extreme, perhaps Charles Maurras. Charles Maurras is 19th century, early 20th century, and he goes a step further and he says, no, nations come first, not individuals. Everything is the state, okay? He emphasized military might and expansion. He, in history books or in political philosophy books, you will find when students learned about him, pre-university students, not in any great depth, the books refer to him as a sort of a radical nationalism. I'll read you from a little bit of a blurb here about him. Maurras' political ideas were based on integral nationalism, and some of its qualities include anti-individualism and aggressive expansionism. Integral nationalist states were usually totalitarian, where the state dominates all aspects of society. Mussolini's Italy was the first example of such a society. Japan in the 1940s would be another, as it often overlaps with fascism. A major tenet of integral or radical nationalism is the total immersion of the individual in the interests of the nation. Emphasized militarism and so on also. Okay, so that is, we have a positive and a negative view of where you can take this emotion of nationalism. Another one, and Rabbi Weiss mentions the founders of this, what he calls a nationalist ideology for the Jews. He mentions Herzl and Ben-Gurion and so on. And I haven't had time to look into their writings or their thoughts yet. But in this book, for example, we have an explanation. Also, I have another example of a different kind of nationalism, which is the anti-colonial kind of nationalism, when a nation or a group of people actually to fight against colonialism or imperialism or whatever. Okay, so they want to be independent. They are fighting for self-determination in whichever form and so on. And as an example, Marcus Garvey, he is from also 19th, 20th century. And this is about race for black people. And his notion of a nation was, the key ideas in any way were people should be, this is for black people especially, he says people should be proud of their blackness. Africans are one nation wherever they are. I'll read you from this blurb. Marcus Garvey was born in Jamaica, but traveled around Central America and lived in London and America. Garvey was an early advocate of Pan-Africanism, founding the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the UNIA, as well as pioneering Black nationalism. His three things were, excuse me, Black pride. Garvey encouraged African people around the world to be proud of their race and to see beauty in their own kind. His central belief was that African people in every part of the world were one people and that they would never progress if they did not put aside their cultural and ethnic differences. Garvey's ultimate dream was for the creation of a United States of Africa. Garvey set the precedent for subsequent Black nationalist and Pan-Africanist thought. By Pan-Africanism, Garvey advanced a Pan-African philosophy. He wished to inspire a global mass movement and economic empowerment focusing on Africa, where he sought to end imperialist rule and create modern societies. He argued that Black people would be respected only when they were economically strong and proposed an independent Black economy. He connected Black communities on 3 continents with his newspaper, The Negro World, and formed the Black Star Line shipping company to provide transport and to encourage trade among Black businesses of Africa and the Americas. And then on separatism, he says, although he was a supporter of racial separatism, he believed that humans were all equal and did not wish to create a hostile atmosphere with white people. The purpose of separatism, he said, was to empower Black people and to enable them to find an identity. Okay, so I'm going to read more about Herzl and Ben-Gurion because it could be that they founded the Zionist, I don't know, okay? But it could be that they founded Zionism in order to get all the Jews together in Israel, yeah? Obviously not based on race or the color of your skin, but based on religion or faith. All right, so then the other video that I watched, as I said, was from Professor Ilam Pappe of the University of Exeter. And he, as I said, he gave this lecture in Berkeley 2 days ago. And I'll put the video there. But he says, look, before the 7th of October of this year, when the whole thing started, okay, have to be careful with my words. He said there was already a lot of division in society in Israel. And he's going to explain what that was about and how things might develop. He says, the Israeli society was already divided, as we all know, because we all saw it on television, things, on political issues, okay? The prime minister was having problems, trying to change the law. You all know about that, okay? He might have been in trouble, and so all these things that we all know about, okay? So there were a lot of people, I suppose, in his favor and a lot of people protesting in the streets against him, and they wanted him to go and so on. But Professor Pappe goes a little bit further. He's also Jewish, and he says, the problem is that this is prior to October 7th, okay? There were, he says, the problem was not just about the prime minister, yes or no. The problem was that there were 2 visions within Israeli society. those two visions as to the future of Israel. One is religious and the other one is secular. In other words, divisions about the identity of Israel. Let me go a little bit further. And this was the main topic, the main issue until the 7th of October. There was there already a division, struggle between what he calls, within the same Israel, between the state of Judea and the state of Israel. What does he mean by that? I didn't know. So the state of Judea, in his view, was the state in the when the state in the West Bank was established. He puts them together at the very beginning. Okay, what you had together was Jews, religious Jews, observant Jews, and also Zionist Jews. In other words, the religious and the, let's say, the political. Yeah, but he puts them in one same camp, and I thought, now how this is getting complicated, because he puts them in the same on the same side, and I just heard the rabbi saying that they are opposed. So I said, okay, so I'm getting all confused now. How can Professor Pappe put them in the one side? And he goes on and he says, he puts them on the one side because the Jews in Israel, for religious reasons, and the Zionists, who may be for political reasons, but political reasons based on faith, on the fact that they're all Jews, even if they are secular or non-religious, as the rabbi says. So these two, which have a common Jewishness together, okay, identifies them both. And on the other side, that's one side. On the other side, he puts, as an example, the city of Tel Aviv. He says the other side is the modern Israel, the diverse, the cosmopolitan, the European, if not geographically, at least culturally, the modern Israel, cosmopolitan, diverse, and so on. In other words, one that does not want to be identified necessarily as being a Jewish state. That is the fault line, as it were. Okay, so on the one side, the moderns, yeah, the Europeans, we are a state like any other state, which is going to be difficult to maintain, but in any case, and the others who, one's based on faith and the others based on, one's based on religion and the others using religion, okay, on those both sides. Okay, so you can see where this is going, because this is going to create, I mean, you don't even need to think about it for very long before you see that there are divisions and subdivisions here that create a very complex issue. Because, for example, if you are on the Tel Aviv side, just to continue with the metaphor, with the modern European kind of state, you're going to have also this cultural inclusivity. We're all the same, everyone is welcome, compassion, all these things. Okay, but that is the liberal, as it were, but that is going to enter into a conflict with, well, how about then these Palestinians who are living next to you in the West Bank or Gaza and so on? Do you see? And so that's divisions on that side. And then on the other side, you have the observant Jews and the political Jews. So obviously, he says, the professor says, obviously this is, it's not civil war, but it really is a cultural war that divides and subdivides, and there are many fault lines there, many cracks. And he says, within all these divisions that were there and they were going on before October 7th, if you brought the topic, the issue, the problem of the Palestinians, the West Bank, the Gaza, that was not part of any of the issues that people were discussing. He says, if this could not be part of the conversation, no one was talking about this. If you said, but surely if you talk about the future identity of Israel, shouldn't you bring into the mix the Palestinians here, the issue of the Palestinians? No, that was not to be mentioned. So, you see, that has been more or less sorted out. That was sort of a problem there, but that was not part of the political discussion at the time. And so you have these optics, this visual of these people who were on October 7th in a festival, and the festival was for peace and love, which is, very liberal, progressive, peace and love for everybody. But he says 1.5 kilometers away, behind the gate, were people who for 17 years had been, couldn't go out, couldn't come in, where food was rationed. Calories were rationed, and electricity and so on. And they were only sort of 1.5 kilometers apart. So obviously there is an elephant in the room there that they were not addressing, as it were, and eventually it's going to appear. The emperor is wearing no clothes somehow. Someone is going to shout it out. So the occupation or the settlements, I don't know which word to use, you use your own. But the important thing is that, the amazing thing is that it was not part of the discussion. The problem, for the most part, had been solved somehow. Even though it was there very visible, he states that, for example, the Israeli Palestinians on a daily basis are, for example, afraid to walk at night or something like that, because apparently there are gangs who are well equipped, and they it's not safe for them. And then, of course, you have the West Bank, with its problems. And then you have Gaza with more problems. So it's something that has to be addressed. But he says that really there are two forms of apartheid. The secular, which is democratic, enjoying democracy, having a pluralist, fine life. The religious one, the domestic issue, what kind of Jewish life in the public domain do we want the state of Israel to have? Now, so all this was open up, blew open, as it were, on October the 7th in those terrible happenings. At the moment, these old political cracks are put aside for a little while because everyone has joined, is united behind the army, he says, and the Prime Minister said that Israel is now at war, and now everyone in the society is, as it were, on the same page. And then he says, but the problem is that when we look at an issue like this, one of the terrible problems, and it doesn't help when we try to understand it, is to try to forget, ignore the context and ignore the history. He says, decontextualizing and dehistoricizing the event, the present. Because unless you know and you're aware of the causes, this is obvious, you cannot address the problem. And the question will ultimately have to be, what do we do about the real cause? And then he goes on and he has a video for about an hour. I will put it below, as I said, so that you can watch it. I encourage you to watch it in its entirety, because whether you agree with him or not, or I doubt you remain indifferent, but that is his view as a Jewish person about the fact that Israel cannot ignore that. He says that, for many, many, many years now, the objective is to obviously get the Palestinians out, but instead of just doing it in one go, it's done little by little. He remarks on the suffering that has been going on for a long, long time. And he feels as a Jew that there are many like him who feel that there is something wrong about it, and so on. Okay, so he gives a very long history, and I urge you to watch it. Of course, on the other side, I haven't looked at any. These two fall into the same category, I would say. I'm going to try to watch the other side from perhaps videos from American Jews or something like that, who might expound the Zionist side of it. I watched one, very short one, by Ben Shapiro, but I find him difficult to follow because he speaks so fast. I cannot think at the same time he speaks, so I don't find him helpful in that sense. He's not calm, so obviously he feels very strongly and is very ideological, but I would like to find some others. So what I have been doing, what I am still doing, believe it or not, I'm going to show you, because I'm fascinated, by this issue. First of all, from not knowing anything about it at all. So, where is I have. Hold on, let me get the books. Okay, I'm going to show you something. By the way, I forgot to tell you. I should have told you this at the very beginning, because this is a funny story. When I say that I was totally ignorant, and I am, about this issue, I'm going to start learning it and reading about it. But I was reminded of a story about I don't know, 6 months ago or so. I was watching something, I think it was Jewish people who had converted to Christianity, I think, but it was, I think it was not to Catholicism, but to perhaps evangelical, American Jews who had accepted Jesus, something like that. And there was one who was really funny. I'll tell you the story, because he said, just to show you that I'm not the only ignorant person in the world. Okay, so he said that he was telling the story when he first realized that Jesus was a Jew. He said it was at the time when Isaac Rabin had been murdered. And he was traveling, I think it was in New Zealand or Australia, and he was there checking in at the hotel, and everybody was talking about it. And he said, yes, it is the very first time in history that a Jewish political leader was murdered by another Jew. And the old lady at the reception said, well, I'm not sure about that. And he said, oh, yes, it's the first time. It has never happened before. And the old lady said, well, how about Joshua? And he said, who the hell is Joshua? And the lady said, Jesus. And he said, Jesus? Jesus was a Jew? And she said, yes. And he explained, he said, look, I was born and bred in New York. I don't remember the name of the gentleman, right? I was born and bred in New York. And in those days, when I was little, the Jews lived here, and the Italians lived there, and the Irish lived over there. He said, we happened to be next to the Italians. And the Italians were all Catholics. So I just assumed that Jesus was Italian, and he had been born in the Vatican. I thought he had been born in the Vatican, and he was Italian. Okay, so you see, if there are any Jewish people listening, please, I'm almost at that stage where I know nothing about it, but I have decided to learn something about it, and believe it or not, I didn't go out and buy any books this time. I already had them here. Judaism, a historical presentation, Isidore Epstein. This is the same one. A History of the Jews, Paul Johnson. A Concise History of the Middle East. An old book. The Arabs, Peter Mansfield. I don't know when I'm going to read all this. I see that I already started each one of them, but somehow I left it. But, my dear friends, the best one, I can't say the best one because I haven't read them all, but I am absolutely delighted with this. I always say that whenever I want to learn about something, I go to certainly pre-World War, or up to, if pushed, up to the time of the Second World War, because at that time, up to the 20th century, okay, perhaps they didn't have all the information, perhaps their knowledge of history or of politics is not updated or something, but they were written by scholars. I find not from ideological points of view. Perhaps if they are unfair, is because they write from their cultural point of view and so on. But I find them, at least that they are intellectually honest. And I found this, I had it already. Oh, Ancient Times, A History of the Early World by Professor Breasted. I got it in a second-hand shop, and I paid about £4 for it, and it belonged to BSGK October 1936, and now it's mine. It used to cost 7 shillings and 6pence, and I love these books. And they have pictures and photographs, and maps and things. And it says, An Introduction to the Study of Ancient History and the Career of Early Man by James Henry Breasted, Director of the Oriental Institute in the University of Chicago. And this is the second edition. And the first edition was in 1906. And it's absolutely great. So I'm learning about the Babylonians and the Assyrians and the Chaldeans, and even before that. And you know, when you read about this, it all sounds, you can't quite, I couldn't, up to this point, I couldn't actually understand it, because the maps, I only understand the map when I'm reading about this ancient history. If I have, if you give me the old names, Mesopotamia, I need to know that that is now Iraq, because otherwise, especially when you get into Asia Minor and all this, and they talk about cities, which city is that nowadays? I have to put it in today's perspective. And he does a great job of doing that, so I can actually picture it and understand it. So, hopefully, I'm going to make notes. I'm making notes. And I will tell you how before the Hebrews, not before the Hebrews, I will tell you about how we came to Palestine and the Semitic race and all these movements of people, and I will tell you that, and I'll try to make it as interesting as possible. And with that, I thank you very much, and I'll see you hopefully tomorrow. Bye-bye.